Big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. This new year, get clean, quality, pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list, including Ritual's best-selling Essential Prenatal Multivitamin, designed with 12 traceable key ingredients to support a healthy pregnancy. With big changes coming up, take the small steps now and start today with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
I wanted to renovate my kitchen and bathroom, but couldn't afford a huge project. Thankfully, Studio 41 had affordable fixtures that totally renovated my space at a great price. Visit studio41.com to find a showroom near you.
Hi, Marsha. It's Krysten.
Oh, hi. We're going to begin the show in about 1 minute. Hi, everybody. This is Marsha Casper Cook and Krysten Lindsay Hager. And this is our first show on Podbean, and we hope you enjoy it. And we will be every week, as I did in the past, and sometimes I do 2 or 3 shows. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So, Lindsay, Krysten, so what do we want to talk about today, considering we haven't been on for a while?
Yeah, a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
A lot of great books, a lot of great shows, a lot of chaos.
Yeah, a lot of chaos. So, I think that, maybe I should say who we are. It's Michigan Avenue Media. Good story is a good story. I've been doing podcasts for about 16 years, and Blog Talk said bye. And so here I am. So that's what happened. I probably would be with them forever and ever, but they decided to close their doors. So we've done a lot of shows, and we'll have repeat guests and different subjects. And I'm an author, screenwriter, and podcast host. And so Krysten will tell you a little bit about herself, and then we'll go on.
Well, I'm Krysten Lindsay Hager, and I write young adult and contemporary romances. And I love watching happily ever after stories, and so I also enjoy writing happily ever after stories too.
Right.
A little escapism.
Yeah, right, happily ever after. So let's talk about how the market is right now. One of the things while I was trying to figure out where I'm going to do my shows, I looked, I was on Amazon and looking at things, and the problem I could see is that some of the genres that we're in aren't exactly genres that they put us in. Yeah, they put us in the genres, but people can't find. There's so many authors now. So when they click, if you put, like a sweet romance, clean romance, you don't know what hashtags to use. So I think right now is the time to figure out like how to do this on Amazon. And I think I've had books forever on Amazon, but I think it's getting difficult to figure out exactly what we need to do to get our books seen. So how do you feel about that? It's hard.
A lot of times you do find books, particularly like in young adult, you find books that definitely aren't young adult in the Amazon Top 100 category.
Right.
Or people throw the word sweet romance around a lot, and it doesn't always mean that their book really is sweet romance. And
Right.
sometimes Amazon just puts your book into whatever category, even though they ask you for suggestions and you suggested nothing like what they put it in.
Right.
I've seen
Right.
a fiction book in nonfiction category.
Right. In nonfiction. And I go, what do you mean nonfiction? So, and then, so I think it's very difficult. But I think, I like TikTok because you can just get it out really fast. I'm on Facebook, I'm everywhere, and I don't know and I see everybody talking, and they keep thinking of ways to try to get sales. It's hard. It's very hard. But I think the most important thing is how we write. So let's talk about how we write. You write a young adult. So when you decided to do that, what made you decide to be a young adult writer? Because it's hard. It's a tough audience because you got to be right. You can't fool around with them.
Yeah, they will stop reading you if you're not
Right.
authentic and true.
Right.
I loved the genre growing up. I started reading young adult. I think I got my first young adult book probably in second grade. And third grade, definitely. I remember for Christmas getting a Sweet Valley High book. Oh my goodness, that was really something. And by fourth grade, I knew that's what I wanted to do. By fourth grade, I was like, of course, a lot of girls in my class were saying that.
Yeah.
But most of them, got reality checks and realized that that's probably not the best way to go in life. And I still just
Yeah.
stayed with my head in the clouds.
Yeah.
So yeah, in fifth grade and stuff, I remember just consuming books and sixth grade too. Those were the years where teachers would do things like readathons. I don't know if you ever had a
Yeah.
readathon,
Yeah.
Marcia.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah,
What is,
we had
what exactly was that? A readathon?
Well, we had this room at the school. It was a different building, and it was where people would have like wedding receptions and things like that. And
Oh,
they let us take the tables, and we could bring sleeping bags and blankets and make little tents with the long banquet tables. And we could bring books, and all day long we read. And I don't remember if we had to do any kind of like book report or if we got prizes from it. I don't remember that part. But we could bring snacks. And it was a private Catholic school, so we had to wear a uniform normally.
I
We
was
could
just
wear
going to
whatever we
say.
wanted.
I was going to say. So it's all girls.
No, it was boys and girls.
So what did they do? Were they reading too?
Yeah, yeah. We all,
Oh,
got in our
that's
groups
good.
and
Oh,
I remember making like a little like kind of like half circle thing and we like, like we had our sleeping bags, our snacks and our books and it was had to be quiet and then the teachers walked around, make sure you were reading and not, gossiping and fooling around and stuff and it was so much fun. It was like the whole day spent devoted to reading and our they took us to the library firsthand so we could get books in case we didn't have any to bring from home, which I thought was really nice.
yeah.
And so we just had stacks and stacks of books and spent the whole day reading, and it was just really fun.
Yeah. No, I definitely did. We did not have that. We did not. It does sound like fun though, but I went to a public school. It's different. Public schools are different. You know, they don't always do the same things, But I think that, I started myself actually reading when I was very young with my grandmother. She lived with us on some days. Sometimes she lives with my aunt. And then she had her own apartment. But she read a lot of books, romance. We had stacks of them. She used to read in
Mm.
those days. She used to have romance magazines and all of these things. And, that's how I learned, and she read very sexy books sometimes. I think like, really? Yeah, I wonder what she would think about it now, because there's the whole genre. Over the years, I've had so many different people on my show, and we did a lot of sexy books and just all kinds of romance. And I think that is the difficult part about labeling yourself in, an Amazon type of situation,
Hmm.
because, when people say romance, and there's so many categories,
Yeah.
but if you put yourself in romance, it's such a wide, I mean, you're like in competition with so many people. But there are some people, which is not really fair, they put themselves in a very unique niche category, and that's how they get sales, because it's very different. And so if you get really good sales at the beginning, you stay up there. Right, it's right at the beginning. So but people do get mad sometimes if they're reading a book that it's not what they signed up for.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen people complaining about some of like the more like cartoon covers. I've seen people complaining on different social media things that they didn't expect the book to be as sexy as it was, and they're like, "This is not what I expected from the book." Like somebody once said, it's kind of like when you are on vacation and you're tired and you go into a fast food place from back home because you want to know
Mhm.
what you're getting. There's a
Yeah,
joke on the show American Dad about that where they're overseas in Europe and they're like, we're going to go to like, McDonald's or Taco Bell or something. We just want to know what we're getting. They're like, we'll have a nice meal tonight. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
You know, and same things with books. You want to know what you're
Yeah,
getting sometimes.
yeah, yeah. And so I think for me, I've done several genres, and sometimes, the one thing about romance is that if I'm writing a sweeter romance, I'm not sure if they should swear at all. And it kind of limits, because the way the world is now, even on TV, some words are used that weren't used before.
That's true.
So, and you're a big soap opera fan like I am.
Yeah.
So, and they have very sexy scenes,
Hmm.
a lot of them. So, but people are watching them. So, but if you have a romance and you put too much sex in it, then for the person that just wants a romance, sometimes it's too much for them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
well, there's two different kinds of romance readers because some people prefer to kind of like, well, I'll say like a Hallmark movie. They kind of want to see the couple get together and then they kiss and then that's the end. Like that, the whole thing for that kind
right,
of romance reader is them getting together. And other people like to see the couple when they're together for a while
yeah,
and, or like, it also depends if you like a couple to have a real strong emotional bond before anything else, before they become a couple, or if you're not as, concerned about that, you're more into like the physical thing. So for
well, like,
me,
go
I
ahead.
like the build up to the couple getting together, but I also like to see that like them having things in common. Like, well, I hate to say it, like tropes actually are more important these days than categories. And so a lot of times people like will like a certain trope, like enemies to lovers or fake dating. Like enemies to lovers is an extremely popular trope. I don't care for it. I don't mind opposites attract, but enemies to lovers, I know I'm in the minority on that, but everyone loves it. I don't it's not my favorite. I don't pick up those. I like fake dating, when you can tell they both like each other, but they're afraid to be the first one to say.
Right.
Like that's the most recent one that I put out. Or like
Well,
second chance romance.
that's true. That's true because when you do those kind of scenes in a book, I always like call them scenes because I used to do screenplays so much. So, but they're you can't tell if one is going to tell the other that, oh, I really like you, and then the
Hmm.
other person says, oh, you're my friend, and then they go, uh oh, that's not happening.
Yeah,
You know. So I think that's a different kind of romance. While Hallmark, they're going to get together. You know it,
hmm,
but you still watch it because
yeah,
you just want to see how it happens. But sometimes they're not liking each other at first. But I don't, the fact is, I don't know how many books you could probably write where they bump into each other having coffee and then later on they, they seem to work at the same place.
hmm,
They do that a lot. And then they go, oh, do you know that person? You go, well, yeah, they just got coffee. They spilled coffee all over.
hmm,
But they have that quite frequently as a way, and then they're not really sure about each other. So
yeah.
that's you don't want to write the same thing everybody else does.
Yeah, yeah, because you want to a point, because people like certain scenes, like people want to see a certain scene in there, but at the
Yeah,
same time, you want to be a little bit of an original spin on it. Like you're talking about the coincidence where like they see each other, then all of a
right,
sudden they're working at the same place,
right, right.
and it's cute, like oh, what a coincidence type
Or
thing.
he's the boss and she's the boss, or something.
Oh, I hate that when they have like a horrible encounter, or they're like like insult the
Yeah,
other one, and then they go in the boardroom, and it's like here's your new boss, like oh no, I just cringe so
right.
much on that one,
But again,
secondhand embarrassment.
they're going to end up together.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's the thing. I guess, but I think people obviously they like that.
Yes,
And
that's very
so, I mean,
popular.
right, very popular. But for me, I like any kind of romance, and I like Virgin River. I really love it. And then it's interesting when you see people write things like, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, I didn't like this. It's so weird how that is,
Mhm.
and I thought it was a little steamy, but I figured, so what? But then people go, uh oh, steamy. And it was, but it wasn't anything that, was in bad taste, but people have to get the last word in now.
Yeah, or like when a couple doesn't get together and they put the main character with a guy that you don't like. On a show that I liked, Being Erica, there's always people who liked Erica with this character Kai,
Yeah,
and it was a time travel show, so he was from the future, and I loved
yeah,
her with him, but then she was dating this other guy, and people are still, I mean, the show has been off the air for like years, and people are still saying like, okay, which guy should she have been? They're still like arguing about this online.
right.
And it's kind of funny because they did an episode where she was in like 2019 or something like that. And so the show's been up for a while, obviously, but yeah, people are still saying, should she have been with this guy? And people have such strong opinions.
They
That
really
was
do.
one thing with soap operas that I noticed when I was a kid. They would keep the super couple apart for like an like excruciating long amount of time. And
Right.
then they put them with someone else. And
Yeah.
General Hospital, if you ever watched that years
I
ago,
did. Yes. Years ago.
they had
Yeah.
they had Sunny and Brenda, and then they brought this Jax character in. And they kept Sunny and Brenda apart for a long time, and she almost married Jax, and then all this stuff. And I hate when they bring a guy in or another girl in, and they get like really attached, and like they're about to get married, and you know they won't, but they've spent so much time, and it's just like hurry up and get these people together, break up this wedding. I can't handle this,
Well, that's why series are very popular now. And I watch, I mean, sometimes I'd like to just see a movie, and
Hmm.
not, a whole series. Because sometimes I go like, oh, how many are in the series? If there's six, not bad. If there's eight, okay. But if there's like 12, I mean, I watched The Outlander during COVID, and I guess I didn't care then because I didn't watch it before. But during COVID, what else was I going to do? So I found that and I kept watching it. And there were so many in a season, I couldn't believe it. When it got to 16, I kept thinking, like, is this still the same season? And there were a lot. They don't do that. I don't think that way now. It's not like that now because I
Yeah.
think they're going to have another season of that. But I like it, even in a regular series that they have on like Netflix, 6 or 8 is not bad.
Hmm.
There's a lot of them. I just don't feel like it. I think during COVID, people were home all the time. But
Yeah.
now, when people are watching them, it's just kind of, you don't even give it a break sometimes. I usually am very generous and watch the whole thing because
Hmm.
usually by the last few, you get it. But a lot of times it's not a good thing, you know. That's what I think, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's funny. I didn't always used to be someone that would like binge watch, and then now that's changed. Now that we have so much available to us, like with
oh,
Netflix and Hulu, I remember when the show Manifest came out about the plane that disappeared and then showed back up, but the people on the plane hadn't aged, but their lives had moved forward,
yeah,
and the guy comes home and finds his wife had been in a different relationship, and nothing's changed for him. It's the same day for him, but her whole life has changed. And there's a set of twins, and one of them has gotten older and one of them hasn't. He's like still a little boy. And I had to keep watching that. I mean, I was staying up ridiculous
I know.
times, because they don't show you the clock on the TV. So you have no idea how much time has passed. As
Yeah,
you're sitting there and watching it, you just like next episode, next episode. Or
I know.
like now I'm watching Cobra Kai, which is like the continuation of like the
Yeah,
Karate Kid franchise.
right. Do you
And
like
it's
it?
so
Do you like it?
hard.
Yeah,
Yes, my mom and sister were insisting that I watch this. And I was like, well, I only think I saw one Karate Kid movie, and I don't really remember. It was so long ago. And it
yeah,
really doesn't matter because they really fill you in. The storytelling on it is so good. Really, a lot of writers should watch how they handle that, like
yeah,
with flashbacks and the way they keep you wanting to see the next episode and the way they, like the different relationships. Like there's these little romances, this one guy, he was a nerdy kid who was bullied, and then he became the bully, and now he's, circling back and like protecting kids being bullied. And he had a little relationship once he got cool, once he wasn't bullied anymore. And now he's back with that girl. Like they broke up, and it's been several seasons and how they're back together. And I'm like, oh, finally. And I'm thinking, like how funny it is that I'm so invested in this show and these relationships.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. How much time? I have a lot of shows that I watch, and then I go, oh, I haven't watched it in a while because I forgot that I have more episodes.
Yeah. Well,
You
it's so
know,
important for writers to fill the creative well and
yeah.
get more like, to basically absorb story, that really helps your writing. Reading, watching stories really helps you with your writing.
For me, it does. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you listen to well, I like audiobooks too. So audiobooks, you can, it helps me write better, I think, because, you're not looking at the paragraphs. You just keep writing. I mean, reading, so to me, I really
Hmm.
love that. You
Hmm.
know, I just enjoy listening. And then sometimes I listen. It's nothing to do with my story, but something in it makes me think, oh, I write this little note for my own story. It has nothing to do with that story. It just gets me thinking.
I find that with nonfiction. Yeah, I'll be reading nonfiction and I'll be like, oh, this reminds me of my character. And, or, this is exactly
Why
what I
not?
was thinking about.
Why nonfiction? Why is that?
I think because the way like they handle things with like even like, like somebody's personality type or like a psychological thing, like this is why this person acts this way. And it's like, oh, you know what? I can see my character acting this way because of something that happened to him in the past. And, I
Right.
never thought about his backstory in that way. But, well, like when I was writing my Stars in the City series, which is all about, like different, some are soap opera actresses, some are influencers, there's other actors, singers, hockey players, soccer players, you name it. All these different people, pop stars and everything else in there. And one of the things that happens in the second book is a girl loses a friend. And that's like a vein in through the story is like what it's like
Yeah.
to have a friend pass away and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
dealing with the grief. And in Falling for a Star in the City, it's a hockey romance. And a lot of people have said they really like that you see how the grief is causing her to make decisions. Like in one minute she's living for the moment, and the other minute she's being too cautious. And a lot of people who have gone through that were like, "Oh, that explains why I was doing this."
Yeah.
Because that was something that happened to me years ago when I was in
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah. That's sad. That's tough. To have that at a young age. You
Yeah, and
know.
you don't realize why you're acting a certain way or why certain things make sense to you. And
Right.
so sometimes when you see it in a book, like if I were to say to somebody, "This is why you're acting," you get defensive. But when you read it in a book, it's like, "Oh, it makes sense now."
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you figure out things for yourself about yourself.
Yeah.
Like sometimes something that happened to you when you were like 15, 20, 25, or whatever, then now it makes sense to you. But when you were that age, you don't think like that.
Yes.
And then you figure it out. You figure parts of your life out as you get older. Because when you're 15, you don't really think the same way. So something that's traumatic has a whole different meaning maybe later, because then it's kind of like now you understand it better,
I have
where
had
you
a lot
might
of
not have.
adults. Yeah, I've had a lot of adults who've read my books that said that now they've seen something in the book that happened to them when they were younger and
Yeah,
it like permanently scarred them. But when they saw it and they saw the reason behind it in the book, like why this person acted this way or
yeah,
was mean or whatever, they said that suddenly it made sense and it helped them heal from it because it was like, oh, she did that because she was insecure. She did that because
yeah,
she felt threatened or jealous or this or that. And it's like people have said it was kind of like healing or like in breakups. Like they didn't understand why this guy left them. And then when they're reading one of my books, they're like, oh, he was afraid. Like he was getting too close. He felt too
yeah,
vulnerable. Like, okay,
yeah,
now it makes sense. It
yeah.
broke my heart at the time, but now I
Well,
kind of
yeah.
understand it from his point of view.
Right. I know it. When I was younger, we used to like drive around. If you liked a guy and you didn't really know if he cared or not, you would drive around like by his house like a
Yeah.
million times. And you go like, when you get a little older, you go, what was I doing? I wasn't just keep.
Hmm.
And then if you saw the person, you would kind of drive real. You didn't want them to know that you were coming around their house a million times,
Hmm.
which you did. It's just something. And then as you get older, you go, what was I thinking? Why would I do that?
Hmm.
Why would I just say something? But when you're
Hmm.
that age, you don't. You just don't. I often
Well, also,
wonder about if when I was younger, if with all of this social media, how this would be. I probably would have failed school because I would be talking on the phone. I'd be talking, and now I would have been online. I'd be doing social media, which I don't know how good that is because kids probably don't sleep as much
yeah.
because you have your phone. Like when I was younger, like the phone would ring, but now it doesn't. You could just open, you just go into your, you know, like Facebook page or whatever, and nobody knows you're on it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever would have got any rest. Could be. I probably would. Well, I did. Like now I don't. Like you and I have talked about this before. Most people do need rest, and
Hmm.
most of us that are writers, we know we stay up too late. There's no doubt. And when I have one of those days that I really 3:30, then the next morning I'm not functioning as well. I know it.
Hmm.
But I don't know why I do it. Because I get up in the morning and say, okay, tonight I'm going to go to bed early. I don't. And I've
Yeah.
noticed a lot of writers do that. They just
Yeah.
stay up.
What do they say? 3 a.m. is the hour of artists and creatives and
Oh, is
writers.
that what they? Okay.
Well, it's the only time when the phone stops ringing and you're
Right.
not getting texts and people aren't bothering you. I mean, for me, I don't know about, when I'm doing something, if somebody comes in and interrupts, I get out of the world that I'm in, that I was
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need that uninterrupted quiet time.
I get
Um,
distracted more easily. Since COVID,
yeah.
I think I get more distracted easily. That because I go, oh, okay, fine, But then I used to just be way into it, and I didn't look at the phone, nothing. I just wrote.
Mm,
I didn't get distracted, but I do now, and I'm trying
yeah.
to wean myself off of that if I can. I don't know
Mm,
if that's going to be possible to wean myself off of it. I don't know. I see a lot of things that I do that I don't want to do, but I still do them. I'm
mm-hmm.
working on it. I'm working on it. For me,
Yeah.
I know it's not right to stay up so late, and I am mad at myself, but I just keep doing it. And usually, I do not accomplish anything.
I do. If it's late at night, I do. During the day, no, I'm no good. But you were saying before about how, like when you're 15, how you look at something differently.
Yeah,
I have also seen people reading a book or watching a show and seeing something that triggers something like, hey, wait a minute. I don't like how this guy is treating this girl. Like
yeah,
it'll be like a little subtle thing. And but wait a minute, that reminds me of how the guy I like might be acting towards me. I've
yeah,
seen girls say that, and I try to like show little things, like not be real over the head, because I want people to say, "Hey, wait a minute," because there was a person, and she was not a teenager. She just likes YA fiction, and she was starting to say things, and she says, "Well, it was like she was kind of seeing her own relationship," and she said she could be more objective because she was like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is why I'm acting the way I'm acting," because she was worried that she was coming across like jealous or kind of like domineering or whatever. And she was kind of worried how she was coming off. And when she was reading this book, she was like, oh, this is why I'm acting this way. It's because I have an insecurity from my past relationship. And she didn't realize that she was carrying over what this guy years ago had done until she was reading this book. Oh, it was a book I wrote, Dating the It Guy, where the character Emmy has a wall up because she was hurt in the past by somebody who cheated on her.
yeah,
And although that isn't even in the book, she just references the fact that in her past, some guy had, dumped her for
yeah,
somebody else. And it's still carrying. So the new relationship, she doesn't really feel comfortable to let her guard down. And she said that she didn't realize that the reason she was basically doing this stuff is she was throwing up roadblocks because she was still hurting from something that happened in her past. And I think a lot of us do that. And we
oh yeah,
don't see it. Like if your friend tries to tell you that, you're like, no, no, I'm not. But if you see it in a book or something and you're feeling for the character and you're
yeah,
like really engrossed in it, you
yeah,
start to feel those feelings and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this is familiar. I went through this.
yeah. Well, because we all do. I don't think
Yeah.
it's that uncommon, to people to feel that way because, people in certain parts of their life, they are insecure. But, and our relationships matter and things we do, life changes so much,
Mm,
and so we got to go. So our character's the same. I mean, I feel like my characters are kind of like people I know. They're like my friends. I can't
mm-hmm.
even change their name if I want to because that's who they are. I've tried
Yeah.
to
Yeah, yeah, I've
change the
done that
name.
too, and you can't. Yeah,
No,
exactly. That's
no,
who they are.
yeah, and because right, and I want to change them. And I think some people say, oh, then you can just do, on the computer, you can change the name, just switch to the whole thing. You can just go on and say, change everything, so you can. But to me, it wouldn't be the same story if I changed the name. So I
Yeah,
find it
I
very
I'll have a
difficult.
name that I picked like years ago because there are some stories that I've been thinking about for years before I put it on paper, or because I've been working on something else I haven't gotten around to putting it out or finishing it,
Yeah.
or something else had to come first. And then I meet somebody with that name, or somebody has a baby and they use that name, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I remember there was somebody years ago that was having a baby, and they were trying to figure out what name to use for this little girl. And one of the names on the table was Paige. And I thought, oh, please don't, because I've been working on that Paige character for years. Please don't take Paige. And I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And she didn't end up using it. And right after, I was like, ooh, dodged a bullet. And then right after that, I joined this Bible study, and this girl was, and the funniest thing was, is now that scene isn't in there, but at the time there was a scene in there about her wearing this certain pair of shoes. And I was sitting and I noticed this girl's shoes, and it was just like what I had written. And that's why I took it out of the book. And I introduced myself to her and she said, "Hi, my name is Paige." And I was like, no, I have to take that scene out because she would never believe that I had written that scene already.
Right.
There she was with her little leopard flats on, and I thought, oh my goodness, no, this is not happening. So I went home and I took the shoes, the little ballerina flats out of the
Yep.
story,
Yeah.
but I kept the name Paige.
Yeah. That's a cute name. I like that name, Paige. It's a good one. I think, I've had so many different shows naturally, and everybody, a lot of us really do have very similar ways of writing. Some people write, a lot of people do write longhand, even to this day, people do. Because sometimes
Oh,
when I write longhand, it's much easier for me. I just kind
hmm
of write it and then I go on the computer. But sometimes for me, it all comes out that way. But when I put it on the computer, naturally it gets, it sounds better. But if I just feel like when I'm doing that, I'm right in the moment
hmm
when I do that. And the other day I said, okay, fine, I'm just going to sit and write. But then I didn't. I went on the computer because sometimes I feel like the best of me is when I just write it, on a pad of paper,
Yes.
you know.
And I edit better too when I write it on it because when you're putting it then in the computer later, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't need this line.
Right,
Or wait, and
right.
once it's typed, you don't
Yeah,
edit as ruthlessly.
right. And I think that's a problem for authors. It's a problem for me editing because I'm editing and I know I'm going to go back and change it. So I don't know why I do that, because whatever you're writing, you're going to change it.
Yeah.
It's inevitable when you go back, you change sentences, you just change a lot of things, So I think sometimes, why do I edit myself when I'm just writing the first, I just don't know why I do that, but I'm trying not to, but I still have a lot of issues after all these years that I
hmm
wish I could change about my writing. And I think a lot of authors do, you know.
I have a problem where I have trouble letting go of characters. Like I want to continue, but I want them to I want to go through the whole motions with them again of like falling in love again and everything like that. And so sometimes when I do that, I'll write a scene and I'll be like, oh my goodness, okay, I'm changing this. This is going to be how they meet. And it takes me sometimes forever to get a book together because it's like I've
Right.
rewritten the scene different ways. And it's like,
Me
well, which way
too.
do I want to
Yeah.
use it?
See, right. And I try,
But I
and
just fall in
I
love with them.
them. And then, but even now, I was done with my series, my Warrington, but I'm not done. And then I figured, like, well, I got good reviews, so why am I ending it? Because they're still
Yeah.
in my head. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I wish if they were done, I thought I would be done. Because I go, after the last third one, I go, nope, I'm done. But then 2 minutes later, like right when I was done, I go, wait a minute, what about this one?
hmm
Because you write when you write with a lot of characters, I think that's what happens because
Yeah.
some of them are not fleshed out and there's more to the story, and
Yeah.
that's what is happening to me.
Well,
That's
that's how
probably
I,
that's why you like
that,
soap operas. You're never done,
yeah, yeah, the episodic stuff. Yeah, well,
right?
my latest book, that's why Falling for Star in the City had a character, and that's my hockey romance, where this girl, she had broken up with her boyfriend. He was this pop star, and he wanted to kind of get back with her, but she found this hockey player. And my mom had told me for years before the book came out. So the book came out in summer, and my mother had said for years, Walker's story isn't over. She's like, you
Yeah,
need to give Walker his own romance. He
I
needs his own
know,
story.
I know.
So what the book I just released was When Stars Collide in the series, or sorry, When Stars Collide in the City. It's part of the Stars in the City interconnected series. Walker gets his own story. He goes to a event. Paige has his friend Olivia, who you meet in the previous book, and her boyfriend has dumped her. She was an influencer. It's a big public type breakup, and she has to go to this party. And they're like, hey, he'll go as your date, and so it'll be like you're not at home crying. This hot indie pop star will be your date, and so you can save face, and people will stop talking about the fact that you got dumped and your ex will be there and yet you can move on. And so, they go to this thing. And of course, she has an embarrassing moment with the ex boyfriend's new girlfriend. She falls into a pool and it's humiliating. And Walker gets in the pool to kind of help her out and everything.
Right? Yeah,
And things go on and they end up having to fake a date to like help his career as an indie pop star because something comes up there and to help her save face. And of course, they fall in love because all fake dating books, that's how it goes. And my
Yeah.
mom was like, "Well, keep going with Walker, like give him his, happily ever after too and stuff." And I
Well,
had so much fun with
don't
it.
you like it when people, like, not even just your mother, I mean, people refer to your characters as people? That's one of my
Yeah.
favorite things. When
Yeah.
they,
Yeah. And
I
people
love.
were, some of the readers were kind of divided on Walker because some of them were like, he's a good guy. He's, he's hurting. And some people were like, oh, like how he was with Paige, like what's going on with him. Because he says at the very end of Falling for a Star in the City that he's, changed, he's working on himself. And so then in the next book, when he gets with Olivia, Paige says to Olivia, he says he's changed, let him prove it. And of course, he does, because I would not let my character end up with a guy if he was not good for her. I wouldn't let the character end up in an unhealthy relationship to
Well,
end a
right,
book.
especially with young adults. Yeah,
Yeah, like
that's
I'll show sometimes, like this is why this relationship isn't good, but then she realizes it and gets out, because I think so much now there are so many examples of unhealthy relationships in, celebrity, popular culture, whatever. And so it's important to say like, hey, wait a minute, there are
well. That,
boundaries, there are limits of what you should put up with.
see, actually, that's what I wanted to do, and well, my characters have a podcast, and it's all about love. And I thought to myself, I'd really like to do that and have a call in. It's really hard to do that. So, I mean, I'm hoping someday to be able to get lucky enough to have it where I can have call in. And I'd like to do a show to talk about relationships and love,
Hmm.
and family, because we all, that's one thing we all have, you know, trouble with family, trouble with, our loves. This one loves this one, or family. The family doesn't like the person you married, or they don't like them. And it really, it doesn't always work perfectly. So I was hoping someday to get a show like that because I just think that would be fun for people to call in and talk about relationships. Because when someone else hears something that clicks, good or
Yeah.
bad, would help them,
Yeah.
you know. And when you write romance, it's not like you're a therapist because we're not therapists, but you really have to go into your character to understand them. And sometimes with real people now, I feel like since I'm writing, I can feel some of the things that I never would have seen about other people.
Yes, very much
I
so.
go deeper,
Hmm.
with family and things like that because it's almost like you have all these people in your head and you've been writing, your characters, but they have problems. So then when you see somebody, I hate to refer to my characters, but sometimes I do. And I'm thinking, they must think I'm crazy because I have a character that did this, but they're real. And these
Yeah.
are real problems for people.
Well, sometimes they call that like the villain origin story, like in superhero movies. Like they did that movie with Angelina Jolie playing the was it Melissa Maleficent? The
Oh, yeah.
witch or the
Yeah.
bad woman
Uh-huh.
in
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty, and
Yeah.
you saw why she became bad. Or
Yeah.
there was another book years ago where they had the evil grandma in um what's it called? Flowers in the Attic, and they did a
Oh,
prequel to
yeah.
show you
Yeah.
why she was the way she was. And I
Right.
think that's one thing I notice now that a lot of times when they say hurt people hurt people, I
Yeah.
notice a lot of times, because somebody told me something that someone had done to somebody I know and cared about, and it was so hurtful and it
Yeah.
was so painful. Like I was almost just in tears hearing about
Yeah.
it. And it
Yeah.
was just the other day. And I said, but you know what? It was hard for them to see that person going through something. So maybe that's why, like
Right.
giving a little grace. But it was really hard to hear that how they treated this person at that
Yeah.
time. But it's like, well, maybe here's where they were coming from. I don't know. But you do start to see after a while. I mean, some people are just jerks, but there are times
Yeah.
when you do see like, oh, here's the reason they acted this way. And
Yes, there are real jerks out there. Yes.
yes, there are jerks out there. Disclaimer for the show. Yes, there are.
Uh, and there are some really nice people, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, they're people to us. So, uh, there's some kind of contest that I saw for like screenplay writers, and it said it's just a screenplay where you have very few different places they're at, and just a couple people in the screenplay. And I thought, well, maybe I should try this because I always wanted that, but I always put in so many characters.
Yeah, I do too.
And because like I love Bridges of Madison, and there are these two, right? Here's Meryl Streep, Clint Eastwood. I just keep watching it, the way they were interacting with each other, and I just love it. But I thought I can't do that because I would have the neighbor, this one, that one, the husband would be in. It was just them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I want to do that, but I somehow put too many people in. I put a lot of people in.
Yeah, I like to have like with friend groups, like some people just have like one friend. I like to have more than one because well,
Yeah,
most people do, but you need different opinions to
right.
bounce things off. And sometimes you
Yeah,
need the friends to be of different opinions to really kind of confuse the character so the
yeah,
character has to dig deep and see, okay, what do I really want? Because sometimes people do like, like they listen to one friend too much, and I think it's interesting if they have one friend that has bad advice,
right,
you
right.
know, or
Yeah,
and one
yeah,
friend that's more down to earth and sensible, but they don't
yeah,
necessarily want to hear the down to earth and sensible. So they,
yeah,
they blow up their lives a couple of times.
yeah, yeah. Right. But just I mean, imagine just two people in a whole like screenplay.
Yeah.
That's like a play. I don't know. I might try it because I think it's really hard to do that. That's why they're having, obviously, because it's very hard to do. You know, and even when they do plays that are like a one woman show or one man, I think that's hard. They have to carry the whole thing themselves.
Yeah.
But I think people, I guess, I've seen things like that, and I guess you really do find out about people when they're just talking. Like when I've mentioned many times, I've told people if they're writing a character and you get confused, you don't know, just sit down and write a letter as that person.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then you find out all kinds of things. Like when I wrote Love Changes, that's what I did. I wanted to understand the woman who could just not be with her child after she had a child. And I wanted to understand how that could happen. The child was challenged. And so I went to actually work at a place where I could be there for lunch. And I went to circus and I went to all these little events with people that were challenged. And I learned a lot. But I still could never figure out, even when I did that, I could, why a mother, no matter what, would not love their child or
Hmm.
be or just have and through that I wrote that Love Changes, but at the end of the day it worked out, but it was a long stretch. And when
Hmm.
I was writing it, it was the first book I wrote, and I was crying because it was so sad that sometimes do you feel that when you're writing something sad?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had that where it really
Yeah, it,
chokes you up.
right. And I think they say if you feel that emotion, then your reader will.
Yeah. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how, like, when I was doing screenplays, whatever, when the characters were over, like we were saying before, though, in a screenplay, it's just one screenplay. And I would feel bad. I want to know what happened to them afterwards because they become
Mhm.
such a part of you.
Well, I was like that as a kid too. Whenever I would watch a movie, I would want to know like like Cinderella. Of course, now I guess Disney did make like a Cinderella 2 and 3 or whatever.
Yeah,
But
right,
as a kid, after they got married and they went off in the little horse-drawn carriage, I wanted to know, okay, what happened next? Like, what's it
right.
like
Yeah,
being a princess after this? What's it like to,
yeah,
deal with him now? And of course, now as an adult, you're looking at what happens after, the credits roll. But yeah, I'm that way too. I like to see a little bit. That's why I do like epilogues. I've only written one epilogue because now I'm writing an interconnected series and stuff. So I don't really want to write an epilogue. I want to like show it in the next book. Like even though it's another character you're focusing on, I continue like another character's story in it, like interwoven. So even though it's like focusing on like this past one, Walker and Olivia, you do see a little bit of Paige and Victor from the previous story. So I'm not really writing epilogues right now, but I did one for dating the it guy. And that, like I wanted to see like, well, okay, what happened to them down the road, And so
mm,
I wrote, years later. So like they're in high school when the book starts, and in the epilogue, she takes extra classes so she can graduate from college early. and he's graduating. So you find out what they do and are they still together and what happened with their families and everything, because it's a very family oriented book. Brendan is like, kind of like like from this political family. His dad's a senator, his grandpa was a senator, that almost ran for president. Like, so you wanted to see like, okay, what happened in the
Yeah.
future? Like, what was Brendan gonna do? Was he gonna run for office like his old man? Like you used to say, oh, my old man wants me to do this and I
Yeah.
want to do this, and then you see like,
Yeah.
what's she gonna do in the future? She wants to be a writer, but what does she do? And her grandma had died in that book, and so grandpa was living with them. And the one question everybody was asking is both of them had a grandparent that had a health issue. And
Yeah.
everyone was like, are the grandpas both still in the book? And I was like, yep. And there's a really great scene with them and stuff. And
Right.
yeah,
Right.
interesting.
Because sometimes you're not done with the people.
Yeah.
And when you in your head, like, and I myself, after I finished the third book, it's all about a wedding, then I went like, oh, what happened to Alex? He was the best friend and the driver of this very rich guy. And Ava, who was the housekeeper that took care of his children, the other, the rich man, forever. And then he gave her a present after the kids were grown, her own coffee shop. So
Right.
he bought that for her. But that I didn't realize that Ava and Alex should get together until after I was done, because I had no
Ah,
idea. There was no mention ever that they had anything. And actually, when they weren't working together anymore, they missed each other. And I realized that after I wrote the book. So it's so they're still in my head. That's what happens. I know people probably, that's why it's always good to talk to writers or hear writers, because your regular friends don't really understand this. They probably think we're
no, they
crazy.
don't.
I think we're crazy.
Yeah,
I'm
they're like,
talking
well,
about,
what when you say that your character is
right,
doing something you don't want them to do, they're like, you
right.
wrote the character, just
I
get your
know.
eraser out. Like, you tell
Yeah.
them what to do, and it's like, no, that's not how it works.
And that's the hardest thing also for a writer. I think at the beginning to know that you are not that character.
Hmm.
People think, I love when they talk about, oh, the writer thought this and the writer thought that, and this is how the writer is. The writer, no, these are how the characters are, not us.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not like my character. But that's when you make a character, you're making up different parts. So it's hard sometimes, like for me, it was very difficult to swear a lot. And then certainly I can swear a lot now, but I couldn't then. And I just didn't know how to do that in a book. I'm like, I
mhm,
can't do that or whatever. But you do. And then it's just weird how that is, because it's not about us. But like someone say, what part of you is in that book? None.
oh, I hate that. I hate that question.
you know, don't, right? None. It's because when you make up a character, it is your words from that character, because they're talking to you, because they are really in the situation. It's not our situation; it's theirs.
Yeah,
So if you're writing a murder mystery, it's not you. It's murdering. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you don't murder people. Your character did.
yeah.
Although sometimes when you're watching something and it's really evil, you go like, how did they think of that? Don't you feel
Yeah, well,
like
exactly. Do they have a dark side I don't know about? Yeah.
so that's the bad thing when we do things like that. But
I'm aware of that, but I had a friend who wrote a book, and it was my first book that I had read by her. And I was so surprised. It was not what I was expecting from her at all. And I was like looking like, that's it. There's a whole different side of this girl that I do not know, because it was so different than what I would have thought she would have written.
because when I was writing sexier books, I thought, well, my father's gone and my mother, and so it's like thinking like, what would they have thought of me if I'm writing this? I had guests on years ago, and they all used different names. Then they never told people, because one was on the PTA. They never told people who they were, but they did not want anybody to know it was them writing
Yeah,
ever.
I've heard that with
Yeah,
teachers. Yeah.
because I sometimes think like, oh, I don't even know if I would have told my father that was me. Because you sometimes you just don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah,
And
I have
the
one book that I was afraid to put my name on because I thought, well, her situation is very close to mine in a lot of
yeah,
ways. And it's the one book that I would prefer people that I know not to read. It does reveal a little bit too
yeah,
much.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, I think we all have one of those books. It's like, ooh, okay, I want everyone to read it except anyone who knows me and who's ever met me.
Right, right. It's so weird, isn't it? I know. All right. Well, shall we end this show and say goodnight to everybody?
Alrighty. Well, sounds good. And I'm glad that we got to finally do a show on the new platform. Miss being with you, Marsha.
Yeah, this was great. I know. I haven't done a show since like December. And it was like I felt lonely doing no shows. But I was working on this. And hopefully, this show, everything will go well with the sound. I'm hoping. Right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to end the show. And thank you so much for being on the show. First show, new season. And as always, you're welcome to come on anytime you want. But I'll be
Oh,
here.
thank you.
So, and I'll probably have guests, three or four people as I usually did before. And maybe we'll join, you'll join us too when we decide to do this.
Can't wait.
Okay. All right. Take care. And thank you all for listening. And this will be on Spotify, Apple, iHeart. It's going to be everywhere. So this was fun. And thank you so much. Bye bye. Good
Good
night.
night.